Truman Burbank's life had always been shrouded in an inexplicable sense of unease. Despite living a charmed existence within the dome, he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that everything was fabricated. His suspicions intensified when he unearthed the reality of his existence as the unwitting protagonist of a twisted reality TV show. Truman resolved to abandon the dome and enter the real world, heedless of the ramifications. As he ventured into the blinding daylight, he was met with an overwhelming cacophony of unfamiliar sights, sounds, and scents. The world was far vaster than he had ever fathomed. Reporters and fans swarmed around him, eager to capture a glimpse of the man they had vicariously lived through for years. Although overwhelmed, Truman felt an electric exhilaration. He had never felt so alive. This was the world he had been deprived of, the real world, and he was determined to devour every morsel of it. He beamed at the cameras, waved to the mob, and permitted himself to be engulfed by the moment. Truman marveled at his newfound freedom. The deceitful dome left far behind. The real world was ripe with novelty and excitement. Endless possibilities awaited him. He was now wealthy beyond his wildest imaginings, and the world was his oyster. People were drawn to him, yearning to be near him, to touch him, to be seen with him. He was a bona fide celebrity, embracing his fame with open arms. He frequented every TV show and media outlet imaginable. He recounted his life within the dome and divulged his suspicions of its falsehood. He spoke passionately about his liberation and his newfound zest for life. The world was enthralled by Truman and his extraordinary tale. They craved the minutiae of his existence, his breakfast choices, his sleepwear, and his opinions on the latest scandals. The media hounded him relentlessly, and Truman reveled in the limelight. But beneath the adoration and acclaim, Truman felt hollow. He had no authentic connections or family, and he couldn't dismiss the nagging thought that people only cared about him for his fame and fortune. As his celebrity status soared, trusting others became increasingly difficult. He wondered if they were simply using him for their own benefit. Truman knew he needed genuine connections to attain true happiness, but for now, he basked in the warmth of fame and fortune. As time went on, Truman began to grow weary of being relentlessly hounded by cameras and fans all vying for a piece of him. Truman maintained a facade of strength, even as the feelings of unease gnawed at him from within. His loneliness and isolation became increasingly oppressive. The paranoia that had plagued him in the dome lingered, making it difficult for him to trust those who sought his company. Truman couldn't help but wonder if the people he encountered were actors, and that he was still being monitored and manipulated by some unseen entity. Truman began to withdraw from the world. He stopped answering calls and avoided public appearances. In spite of his success, he found himself alone and afraid, yearning for the familiar security of the dome. He tried to remind himself that the real world was far better than the artificial one he had escaped, but his mind betrayed him. He was trapped in a new kind of prison, one that was equally restrictive and insidious. As Truman's world crumbled around him, he faced the chilling realization that he might never break free from the ever-present sensation of being watched. The world outside the dome was far more complex and treacherous than he had ever imagined, and it loomed over him, threatening to consume him completely. Truman's paranoia began to devour him as he grew increasingly estranged from the world. He barricaded himself in his apartment, and in a manic frenzy, he dismantled his home in search of hidden cameras and microphones. Despite finding nothing, he was still convinced that he was being watched. Truman's mental state rapidly deteriorated, and hallucinations tormented him. He envisioned actors lurking in the shadows, waiting to ambush him. Voices haunted him, whispering that he was still trapped within the dome, his every move watched and controlled. Truman's once charismatic demeanor devolved into volatility and unpredictability. He lashed out at anyone who dared approach him, convinced they were part of a grand scheme to manipulate him. As Truman's grasp on reality withered, the world watched in horror. The media that once lauded him now depicted him as a tragic figure, a casualty of his own fame and isolation. In the end, Truman's paranoia sealed his fate. He became a cautionary tale of the perils of fame and isolation, a man who had everything but lost himself in the pursuit of something more. The man who once escaped the fabricated world of the Dome was ultimately devoured by the dark underbelly of the real world.